Okay, Algebra 1, we are moving on to section 3.5, solving inequalities with variables on both sides. So this is very similar to solving equations with variables on both sides. So lots of those skills that we practiced during that section in our last chapter will help you with this. So anytime you are going to solve an equation or an inequality, I always like to determine both sides of the equation or inequality by drawing a line through that inequality symbol. Last time you heard me talk about like the weakest link, and in example B, we would definitely use that. But in example A, we have to move this 3x to the other side, or that's the best move, because we have this x over here already. So I am going to move the 3x over by subtracting. It's a positive, so I need to cancel it out. X minus 3x is going to give me a negative 2x less than 8. Then I would, this is just a one-step equation, I divide by that negative 2. We can't forget when we divide by a negative, I have to flip that sign. Give me a negative 4. And that's your answer. Don't worry about graphing these ones. On the next problem, letter B, again, two sides of the equation. Who's weaker, 6x or 3.5x? The 3.5x is weaker, so I move that guy first. The reason why we play weakest link is just to try to avoid negatives. If you would have subtracted the 6, you would have had a negative value. So when I take 6 and I subtract 3.5, I get 2.5. Rewrite what's left over. The only thing that's left on that side is a 4. Now to solve this, I would add the 1 to both sides. I get 2.5x is less than or equal to 5. Divide both sides by that 2.5. X is less than or equal to 2. That's your answer. Okay, letter C. Again, we can't really take the weakest link on this one. If you'd move that 4x over, there'd be nothing on that left-hand side of the equation. So we do have to move the bigger value. And you will see what happens here. When I subtract that 7x, I get a negative 3x. So usually we try to avoid this, but in some cases we can't. Because then in these problems, when you divide by a negative, you always have to remember to flip your sign. So I flipped it. 6 divided by a negative 3 is a negative 2. Okay, next problem. Who's weaker, 5t or positive 2t? Negative 2t. So I would add the 2t because that's who's weaker. 5t plus 2t, 7t. And then on this side, don't forget that that minus sign actually kind of becomes a negative and stays with that 6. And I would minus 1 from both sides. 7t is less than negative 7. Then you divide by a t or a 7, and you have t is less than negative 1. Okay, these are useful when we are trying to make a comparison or trying to solve for when one situation might be better than the other. So this one says the Daily Info charges a fee of $6.50 plus $80 per week to run an ad. So I'm just gonna kind of jot an expression for that. $6.50 plus 80W. The People's Paper charges $145 per week. So there is no fee other than the $145 per week. So that one's just $145 times W. For how many weeks will the total cost of the daily info be less? So I want to know, when is the daily info going to be less expensive than the cost of the People's paper? So I think it's really helpful to put this down in words first, and then go ahead and put in your information. We've already done this. The daily info is $6.50 plus 80W, and the People's paper is $145W. Now it's just a inequality with variables on both sides. You have to get the variables together first. You're always going to be moving those. And I get 650 is less than, and if we subtract 80, and we should get 65W. And then to get W by itself, I just need to divide by that 65. 650 divided by 65 is 10. And then you can kind of ask yourself, well, what does W stand for? W stands for the number of weeks. And so when you answer this question, for how many weeks will the total cost of the daily info be less expensive than the cost of the People's paper? So it will only be less expensive when you have over 10 weeks. Not equal to 10 weeks, but you have to kind of ask yourself what numbers will make W true, and it's 11, 12, 13, 14, that type. So 11, 12, 13, ... weeks. Or you could say after 10 weeks. Either way, but just be clear with your answer. Okay? Okay, a few more problems. These are the simplifying each side before solving. We did a few of these in the last section. Now we just have variables on both sides. So I distribute first. So 6 times 1 is 6. 6 times x is just 6x. And then get the variables on one side. So I add 6. And this gives you 9x. Then divide by 9, and this equals 6/9 or 2/3. I like to leave it, instead of getting a decimal, I just like to leave it in a fraction. Okay, a few more problems here. The next one, remember, if you can simplify it, you need to do so first. So I can take and I can add this negative 0.2x with this one. So this is a negative 0.4x. Simplify before you start moving anything. And then I'm going to move the 0.4, that negative 0.4. And this, when you add those together, it just gives you 2. And then to get x by itself, you divide by the 2. X is less than 4. So as long as you're methodical and you just kind of follow those rules of solving equations, they're not really that much more difficult. Okay, last, there are some special cases that you get all real numbers or no solutions. And what usually happens is that you are kind of playing weakest link. So you have an x and an x, who's weaker? Well, you minus x from both sides. And what happens is the variables cancel out. Now, with an inequality, you have to look at it a little bit more closely. So is 5 greater than or equal to 3? Yes, this is true. So if it's true, that means your answer is all real numbers. You can't just tell me true or false. Okay, so the next one here, simplify first. So 2x plus 2 times 3 is 6. Okay, and then I'm going to still put that line there, subtract 2x from both sides. And right away I notice that it cancels out. Now is 6 less than 5? No, this is false. So that means that this is a no solution. There's no value for x that you can put in there to make it true. Okay, next one, I distribute 4y minus 4. And some of you guys, once you do a bunch of these, you'll get good at them. You'll kind of be able to pick out that the 4y's are going to cancel. And then you have negative 4 is greater than or equal to 2. Is that true? No, it's a false, which means no solution. So if the variables cancel out, that's what you're checking for to see if it's true or false. Last one here, subtract from x on both sides. You end up with a negative 2 is less than 1. Well, that is definitely true. And so then your answer is all real numbers. Notice my answer is not true or false. That just kind of helped determine if it was all real numbers or no solution. Awesome. Very similar to doing the equations.